not going to solve all the problems by providing art, but at the same time, by helping positivity, people are a bit better equipped in dealing with the real life challenges they're facing. And that is true in every country.
Welcome, Shammi. Welcome, Steph, to our podcast. And we are really glad to have you guys on one of our episodes. So, basically, we'll start with introducing you, so you can tell us something about yourselves and something about your backgrounds. Where do you come from? And yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ansh, for having us. We're really glad to be part of this. My name is Steph. I'm a co-founder of Sensistan, and my background is economic and social development. So I used to work for the UN and the German government in development projects. And I'm also a lecturer on entrepreneurship in various universities. Well, this was the life before Sensistan.
Hi, my name is Shammi. I'm one of the co-founders of Sensistan. By profession, I'm an engineer turned investment banker, turned an artist. And in between, I teach in a university and do small consulting gigs.
So basically, with such diverse backgrounds, how did you come to creating a space for artists, and how was the whole process like? So what all went into it, and why did you choose to come into something like this, or commit to something like this?
Yes, so what happened was, while we were working and because of our work, etc., we travel a lot of different countries. For example, Star Self travel more than 80 countries, myself 40 countries. And while traveling, we got into music and arts festivals. And at some point in living in Cambodia, we were organizing a music and art festival. And from Burning Man and from our friends in New York who were already into technology and art, and Steph coming from Austria, there is a huge museum called Ars Electronica, one of the oldest for technology art. So all this inspired together to step feet into this, and I started exploring tech art.
Yeah.
And then we started our NGO in Austria.
Yeah, and so we came to Sensistan through two ways. One way was that we realized technology and art can also help people in conflict countries or in de-stress for relaxation, for getting a new perspective on life, for getting inspired. So it's not education, but something on top to contribute. And then when we organized events in Cambodia, we also formed a community, and it just happened, and we just were, I guess, an instrumental part of developing that community, and we realized how important it is to have community, and it's not about the events but about the community around it, so that everyone contributes and creates a thriving environment. Well,
and for me, after living for 12 years outside India, I wanted to come back to India to get into tech art and join some organization. But I realized that there was no such institution, organizations, or a platform where I contribute or connect with different similar artists. So when there is nothing, we said, okay, let's go and build it ourselves. And this is how Sensistan came to existence.
So we moved to India and bootstrapped Sensistan and started it from scratch in 2018 in Goa.
Great. So you did mention how you wanted to use art to dissolve conflicts and to help the community in general. So I wanted to ask you about one of any projects that you did with NGOs, and maybe you could talk about the project with the refugee camps. And before we get to Sensistan, I would just, that would be an interesting thing for our listeners.
Yes, as part of our journey into Sistan, we created the NGO Circus Collective, in which we traveled various countries to make technology art available to people who are very much deprived of a lot of things, including art and education. So, for example, we traveled to the Rohingya refugee camps at the border to Myanmar in Bangladesh. And we collaborated with local NGOs who are providing primary education to the children from the refugee families. And we added behavioral skills hours with them. So we let them explore and play with interactive art. And it was important for us that they can see all the opportunities the world offers, so that they can see life has hope, and there's more to life than it sometimes appears to. But also to show that through games we introduced we projected little fish which they painted by themselves, and then it was important.
Aquarium.
Yeah, and then that they could see, okay, the fish are stronger if they swim together, right? So we tried to convey through art and through art therapeutic approaches that they get a little bit out of it through low threshold psychosocial support approaches. Very beautiful to see
through this
those little children like lightening up.
Through this project, we connected with UNICEF and Kodak, a local organization, and the volunteers from there. And when we did this project, it was about 400 kids in this Rohingya camps we interacted with over 3 weeks of time. And the result, the outcome, when people spoke to us, the kids themselves, when they mentioned how immersive it was, the different kind of education, but how it impacted them, that forced us or made us feel like, okay, let's do it on a larger scale and do it in our own country, in India, because it's never dearth of doing such things.
Okay. That was important for us because we understood, right, like especially me coming from the working in refugee camps, that you're not going to solve all the problems by providing art, but at the same time, by helping with positivity, people are a bit better equipped in dealing with the real life challenges they're facing. And that is true in every country. And we realized traveling with the NGO has only a limited impact. And this is why we said we need to define one country and set up a permanent station. And that was India.
Yes, that is so true that art cannot solve all the problems, but it can surely heal. So that initiative is brilliant. Like the installation that you guys did was really amazing. So coming back to Sensistan, I wanted to discuss on how and what went into developing Sensistan. What were the challenges that you faced while you were developing it, and like the whole experience of getting artists, bringing in different installations together, and taking up a space in Goa basically, and like all of that. So what all went into developing Sensistan as a space?
Before Sensistan even physically started in Goa, the project Sensistan started even 2 years before. So a lot of thinking, planning that went in before we went even to look for a physical space. So we spent about 6 months to a year designing the whole project, connecting with different artists, telling them about the project, what we are trying to do. And since we bootstrapped it, most of the finances came from our pockets, our savings, life savings. So it wasn't easy either. So we have to convince different parts, of the whole equation to bring it onto a stage. And then once we started looking for a move to Goa, after we designed this thing, we were convinced that we will start, we moved to Goa. And then the real challenges came into starting from the local authorities and
finding a location, right?
Mhm.
And once we found it, setting it up, dealing with all the administration, the delays, finding qualified people to work with, trusted people. There's tons of challenges which every Indian entrepreneur will nod their heads and recognizes, and a few additional challenges which came from the fact that Sensistan entered a new grounds. Interactive art barely exists in India, and a concept like Sensistan is very unique around the world. So it was hard to communicate our approaches to people who have never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, so we made videos, we made a lot of presentations to show it to local authorities, to convince them, to volunteers who came to help us, but they did not know what our idea on a bigger scale looked like when we said we're going to do. So they're like, okay, we understand what you're showing at the videos, but how to make it? Because they did not have enough trust that we could do it, or the people whom we are inviting, they could do it because they never interacted with them. But yes, so overall, it was not one challenge. It's many challenges that put together and overcoming it made the Sensistan alive. As you had witnessed it by the time you had come to Sensistan. Yeah, we had gone through many folds of trial and error and fixing and moving along. And finally, yes, it did work very well.
Yeah.
So
and another challenge, possibly we don't even have to say on top, right after we started, like 4 months after we started, the first COVID wave hit. And so these certainly were unexpected events for everyone around the world, but also for us. And dealing with that as a young culture organization was an additional challenge we had to deal with. But at the same time, Sensistan fared well, and it even thrived throughout the situation, because the team managed to adjust and make the best out of the situation.
Great. So as you were talking about the challenges of this being a nascent industry or a nascent space of interactive art, tech arts, and there are not a lot of spaces in India that deal or have created a lab for artists to come and experiment and create with a free mindset and a very welcoming community that formed around Sensistan. That is how I found Sensistan, because I was looking for a space like this, and to come there was completely a dream come true. So thank you for building Sensistan firstly. And my next question is basically on, because this being a nascent space, the challenges with COVID, how was the interaction with the community, and how important do you think is the participation of the immediate community and the art community around to support something like this, and to basically get the communication forward that something like this exists, and it is adding to the cultural values of that place or arts in general?
First of all, thank you for finding us and coming over to Sensistan. You added a lot of value yourself. As you mentioned, right? I mean, since tech art does not exist like so much in India, and there are a lot of people who are practicing tech art in bits and pieces in their dungeon. So the whole idea to start Sensistan was to create this platform so that we could connect all these people together and inspire more people who want to jump to this stream or field of work or a job or a career, whatever you want to get. So yes, so it helped. So the whole idea is to keep connecting and bringing more people together so that we can bring this art and experience to more and more people. Yes. So besides Sensistan, we did many different pieces. One was with the tech art, and then we also did a lot of events. We did a lot of different kinds of workshops, etc., so that more people can learn about all these things. So we created through workshops to outreach more people, from school students to NGOs, from local NGOs, so that people could come and they can learn a little bit about, and if they're more interested, they could take classes, etc. And then also we created community musicians and different people who come and performed over there, along with technology artists doing projection mapping and adding interactive art while they are performing, dancers, etc. So all this was also encouraged more artists to come, and the community started growing and growing. And at the end of it, we did more than 50 events in over 1 year, and invited more than 4 different NGOs, schools, and did many different art exhibition by inviting different residencies and etc.
Yeah, and I think Shammi, you mentioned, no, like technology art is per definition interdisciplinary, and bringing people with different expertise and background together, that's what makes tech art so exciting, because it is bringing different brains and imaginations together to then together create memorable and unique installations. And this is why a community in one way is really important, because how you get these brains together and also to work together and to create together. And this we did this through the residencies by selecting artists from very different backgrounds, but also by merging technologists with artists to bring the creatives and the like the scientific minds together. So and this is where the most amazing things actually happened. So this is from a creation perspective. I think this is an other aspect for community formation.
How different was it as per your expectations on different people from different communities, a community of, say, musicians, a community of permaculture, people following permaculture, and dancers, performers, then also contact improvisation, a lot of body healing as well, all of that coming together. How different was it than you expected it to be, and how did that evolve with Sensistan?
Coming from the festival background, because we organized, we always had different in one festival, different spaces doing all the different things, from, as you said, from movement to permaculture to acro yoga to projection mapping and music to life events, healing events, etc. So all this were happening. So the back of our head, we always thought to create this space which has all these different components. But being in Goa, it helped us quite a bit, because we did not have to really look out for all this. People start, because we are a space which is a cultural center and one of the most unique spaces in Goa and India. In fact, people started finding us and started offering these kind of workshops in our space. So before we knew it, it expanded as a space for artists of different forms and shapes and creed and things. And a lot of different simultaneous things started happening at any given point of time. Even in one single day, there were different things happening in the same thing. And we did a couple of festivals in Sensistan. which was also an amalgamation of all different components.
And each of the artists or the participants, I think they did expand their own experiences and knowledge by getting in touch with technology. Because not like people, for example, working in permaculture or contact dance, it's typically not so tech-driven. And by adding a technology component, we also expanded their horizon by showing and what's possible, by going beyond the typical way of how it's being done and adding new factors and aspects and making it more colorful, more interactive, and more vibrant by bringing in different technology aspects as an additional layer on the traditional art or movement form they are typically practicing.
Just some light, some interaction, all this increases a little bit of enthusiasm. It reflects.
The whole thing adds to the experience so beautifully. So like it becomes a whole in itself. Yeah. So when we talk about supporting artists and supporting people from different backgrounds, how important do you think Sensistan, apart from being a museum, how important was it as a lab space or as a place of experiments, and how in your experience have artists reacted to such a lab space? And
one sentence we always say, Sensistan is an experiential space for visitors and an experimental space for artists. So because all this, whatever installation or different activities or workshops we did, it's all experimental in such a way that people did not know what to expect, either the audience or the artists, because there's always collaborations that were being formed. So because of this collaborations, yes, people do have a little notion of what could be the outcome, but they did not exactly know what would come. And Sensistan as a space, we always wanted to make sure that we give that space for people to experiment, to come and explore, because all the installations are very unique that was created for this space. So people had that freedom to say, okay, this is my thought, let's discuss and bring it and build it together, either alone or with a group of people, and give it a form and shape. And that's how the whole space became so interesting. And there were so many different, very unique installations that were created during the whole process.
And a lot of the participants in residence programs, as well as in the workshops, also provide amazing feedback to us, and we're very glad. Like our objective was to inspire people, and we do have the feeling that by giving participants and residents the chance of experimenting, they also learned a lot, and they manifested the work they did, but it also gave them a lot of confidence that technology art can also be taken forward, that this can become a career, that it's not a hobby, but it's actually a career in a growing sector, and that it can contribute to job creation in the creative industries in India. So that this realization that out of interest, or that artists who have been practicing traditional forms, that they have been discovering that technology art can be a legitimate future way of further development in their career. And that this was really important for us, that we can provide a platform and the inspiration for young artists and residents to develop themselves as individuals, but also professionally.
Can you take us through probably one of the initial installations, and maybe taking an example of an artist and how the installation was developed? Any
Yeah,
one, whatever. Yeah.
I mean, I would just throw this question back to you. To create your installation, the one which we rotate, how did you develop it, and how? Yes, so one of that example, I just take that, and just from the idea stage to how we implemented it to the final stage of using the light, the light from a light source, and then using different colors. So we had so many of discussions that happened from the initial thought process to finally when we executed that wheel. It was amazing, and the way people reacted, and how we thought people would play with it, and how people end up playing with it, and how they started making a game of it without. When we designed this whole thing, we never thought that would happen, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, we did know.
it's a whole process that goes on, this constant talking and testing and failing, and then coming back and then restarting and not losing hope that I cannot do, or let's stall the process and not move forward, but moving on and finally putting it up on there. And when people come and play with, it is like an amazing process indeed.
Yeah, so as you like, that's something I really appreciate about Sensistan, that it has always been a space for artists to fail and not worry like about failing or not being able to finish something. So that is something I think is really important for artists in India and in this industry itself, because it's a very young industry and there are almost no spaces at all that give that freedom to artists to develop their own art. But my follow-up is also that with the lab, with these research experiments, with these even some failures, some experiments, like how did the museum and the lab work together? Because I'm sure with these experiments, all you also need an outcome after a residency, or after an artist is there and you're developing, experimenting. So how did the finished product come about, and how did you handle those challenges?
Yeah, this is actually the beauty of the concept of Sensistan, that we could create a full circle by having the creation and the imagination process in-house, but then also exhibit and provide the residents or the artists with a platform to also show their results, and also test their results with the audience and see how they are reacting, right? And so having a lab and a museum space under one roof proved to be ideal. So we are very glad we designed this way, and it's at the same time it combined the experimentation, the showcasing. It also allowed the artists to receive feedback from the visitor, and in that way they could also learn and integrate this feedback or also just observing the reactions of how people are engaging with their installation. So this was very instrumental also for our residents to further learn and grow. So because creation is one thing, but then seeing how it's being perceived is a very important part too, and learning from that as well.
So most of the museums around the world, this is our learning from different museums around the world. Most of the museums do have a similar kind of a curriculum or a structure where they have a lab and there is an exhibition part. Because as Steph mentions, that there is a connection, deep connections for the artist to understand how their art is perceived at the end of the day. So they can see it live. Once they experiment, go through this lab phase of experimenting and doing and trying different things, and when it finally becomes a presentable piece, how they perceived or thought that people would play with or interact with, and how actually play or interact with could be two different things. Both are equally beautiful, but the world is how people see it as, and now how you want to show it as.
Yeah, that is the beauty of interactive art. The people who interact with it create with the artist as well. So that adds to the whole experience, and everyone, I guess, takes something different from that experience. Talking about the museum and the experience of it, it was Sensistan has been meant to be a night museum because of the tech involved. So I
The
wanted
lights, a lot
to
of lights.
a lot of lights and projectors. So how what basically inspired this night museum, and if you could take us through the story behind it, and yeah.
Absolutely. There was this book by Erin Morgenstein. It is called Night Circus. It's one of a very beautiful reads. I would suggest highly if you have not read it. So this book talks about setup in 1800s where there is a moving circus which is magical. It has a lot of magical component of it, and it inspired both of us quite a bit. Steph read it first, and she asked me to read it, and we both were very inspired by this. And we said, okay, we have to create a space, and all these things were coming together in our past years. This book and our experience with the festivals, and me wanting to come back to India and trying to do something in technology art, and all this came together, and we said, okay, we want to do a space which has all these different elements.
Yeah, and like the book, but also different other movies and novels that fascinate and inspired us in the past. We realized that many of them were based in magical realism in this genre. And this is when we decided that also Sensistan should be somewhat based in this philosophical and artistic concept. And at the same time, playing with the word what is magic, because as we were technically would like to ride on the thoughts of Arthur Clarke, who is like saying, well, like is technology, is technology and magic were the combination, right? Is it when unexplained, technology unexplained seems to be like magic. And so we would like to make this connection there, and being like, no, we are scientifically driven, but if we let our imagination run, then we can also be open and perceive it as magic. So we like to blur the line between imagination and science, technology and art.
Yeah. So also the story itself on how it is being communicated for. I'm not sure that this is also my question. Was the story also set up in a way that it is easier for children to grasp the whole experience? And so if you could take us through the story itself and how the kids reacted to it, or how even the adults reacted to the whole experience.
Yes. So the whole idea was to include, as Steph said, the magical realism component to it. And to do it, we decided upon a store. So again, our audience being in Goa was from small children to old adults, from national, domestic, local people, from villages to well-traveled international people. So we had to create something that is engaging to all this different genre of people. And to do this, and along with to add a magical realism and to create the whole experience, to not like a museum in a traditional form where you go to one art piece or one installation to another, but to connect the whole experience. So we knit a story of Sista, of a young girl around which the whole of Sensistan is based on. So Sista is a young girl who gets fed up from her day-to-day life. She lives in this modern day time, in the first century. And to cope up with this daily nuances, she goes to a corner of her room and starts painting. And whenever she does the last stroke of painting, she could jump into her painting and come alive into a physical form of her imagination. And every time she goes through this, she creates a new space, and she allows visitors, they come, and Sista allows visitors to bring her to her imagination, to her paintings, and the whole space of Sensistan, place of senses, as we call it.
And so how did young children take this experience or take this story, and then how did they take the experience of Sensistan?
People perceived it very differently, but those who opened up and followed the narrative, they really enjoyed it, because it also allowed them to experience the space differently, right? To see through a different lens. And for us, from a curation perspective, it was important to make it inclusive, so that that people with a less education or who are less tech savvy, that they are not afraid of engaging with technology and with high tech, which is a challenge still in India. And so through putting on an easy, understandable narrative that comes up in that sounds a bit like a fairy tale, people could connect easier, and they felt welcome, and they didn't feel out of place, because that was the worry of a lot of people who are not used to coming to technology places or to museums as such. And that remains an issue in India, that people think art and museums are for the elite only. So for us, it was important to keep the entry barriers low, make it fun and explorable. And this story was one of the many vehicles we tried to use to make everybody feel welcome.
Yeah, that was a really great experience created around the story. My next question would be, how did the international community, because you have been connected to all the great museums you have been around, you have been part of the art community. So how did they react to something like this? And also, they knew you from the initiative that was set up in Cambodia as well. So how did they react to something like Sensistan from coming from a space, an art space from that was set up in Cambodia? So how was that transition, and how did the international community support, or how did they react to something like this setting up in India, in Goa?
Technology and art in India is still very new, and because of that, also the international actors were very wary, or because everybody knew it was a very courageous step of us moving into this field so early. So a lot of international actors were encouraging and excited about us opening Sensistan, and they were providing networks and guidance and sharing. At the same time, they wanted us to prove this concept. And so the first 2 years, we didn't get any support, because as everywhere, you first have to show that what you are thinking of doing, that it actually works, and then people invest by lowering their risks in the investment or in the support. And unfortunately, India itself doesn't have support schemes, so we took our courage together and we bootstrapped for the first 2 years to show that this concept can work also in India. And now now that we can show the impact it already had, we can use this initial experience to grow further in the coming years and work with international artists and as well as culture organizations.
We were in talks with a couple of museums. We have signed some MOUs with international universities and Indian universities like BITS Pilani, AMU, Goa College of Engineering. So it is a combination of different institutions, including museums, embassies. We're still talking to them, but because of COVID, a lot of things had stalled and did not move forward. But we hope in our next edition, we are gonna bring up on all this contacts and make good use of that.
I'm pretty sure of that. That's something I'm confident about. So talking about again from interactive art, it is also a variant of digital art, right? So currently, for the past few months in 2021, we have seen a big wave of a transformation in how digital art is perceived. And with coming in cryptocurrencies and crypto art and NFTs, so how do you think firstly interactive art and digital art are different from analog uh, or authentic art forms that are regionally found, and how and what do you think is this wave of digital art and this new perception of digital art going to help artists in tech art space and museums and lab spaces like Sensistan?
Yes. So digital art compared to a traditional art or interactive art for that matter, adds a layer where in old school museums where you go to one art piece, a painting, and then move forward. But the digital arts makes people to interact with them. So the art grows with individual audience, with every audience that comes. Now, still it is limited to a space because you have to be physically present to play with the digital art in a museum kind of spaces. Now we have to take this, and if you want, as an artist, if he wants to bring this art to a bigger audience, it's easier if it's over the internet or in a digital space or a web space. That's how more and more art forms that started getting like augmented reality or virtual reality. And to add to that, with crypto, as you mentioned, crypto, NFT, where previously the licenses were very difficult, NFTs are making that much more for the artists to make use of their art or to distribute their artwork in a more legal way. Yeah. And we will see how this whole thing develops in future. Even I am very interested to see how this online digital museums and come into picture and how do they make an existence of it. It's an interesting space for sure.
Yeah. At the same time, Sensistan we will see a sense that only online experiences are also limited. So for us, it's important to merge online, offline, traditional art forms and digital art forms, and the interplay with all these different spheres. In our mind, that is what creates the most exciting multisensory interactive experiences, by making use of all there is and combining it in unique forms and ways.
To make it multisensory, the digital would not just do multisensory.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I agree, yes. So, place like organizations like Ars Electronica and CADAF and a lot of new organizations are also coming up with with exhibitions in the physical space, but involving a lot of augmented reality and virtual reality in that uh, in that experience to create a mixed reality, or as they say, XR experiences. So how do you think that, obviously a big role is played by the pandemic in making all of this more acceptable for people? How do you think something like this is bridging boundaries between international artists and museums across? Or also, how do you think these new opportunities are helping young artists come in and experiment with their art with these big museums and big names?
Well, one very concrete example we can say is working in digital art and having more awareness. We, for example, formed a collaboration with the leading technology and art museum in Switzerland, the House of Electronic Arts, and they made available one of their digital art pieces, which they exhibited in their museum. They made it available for us to exhibit in Sensistan. And for them, the motivation was to make it available and have a larger audience at another continent to experience and interact with this art piece. So for them, that was the motivation. They made it available for us to support. And without all the various technologies, but also this openness to online sharing, this would have never happened. So that is a very concrete example.
And also it gives a platform for a lot of young artists to explore and go beyond a physical location. And for the museums, because most of the cost to invite artists goes into their travel, lodging, and food. And through this digital form, you cut all these costs. So for them to invite an artist, it becomes more creative. And for the artist itself to go and present their artwork in different spaces also makes it more sense, so that it does not have to physically go. So all this are in a good deal helping both the museums and artists. But we'll see how it translates, because at the end, there's some form of artwork cannot be done through online. It requires a physical presence. So a mix of it is very good. And yes, I mean, imagine someone from a village or where there are people who do not have a way to go to this museum. I do not know, we were talking about Afghanistan today in the morning. Perhaps someone from there could learn all this online and create an artwork that could be presented some Ars Electronica. And all this makes it possible in today's world, which was not possible perhaps a few years ago.
So we've been exploring this whole format of digital residency. I think it's like an evolving concept where we have to see also, depending on the artists and the residents who are engaging, what they need, how much exchange, how much facilitation, how much guidance, how much is required, right? And so I think, especially for digital residency concept, a very customized and tailor-made guidance and facilitation is required to make sure this is still functioning, because with online, participation goes down and motivation sometimes goes down because social contact is just not that vivid. And this has to be talked about and also integrated in the concept. And we are exploring how to best do that. But our experience now, it really depends on the different actors involved and what's the project, and which technology is used, what the skills, what's the requirements of everybody. And based on that, this needs to be adjusted, because clearly online communication adds a few challenges, and it's not just benefits. So we have to deal with those too.
Yeah, it is actually, I think it's a good balance between like people who cannot actually reach out, the artists who cannot reach out and be in those places. It's a really great opportunity for them to be where they are and still create for international audiences. And in a similar manner, there's still the essence of a physical exhibit and a physical experience would never go away, at least until the near future, until probably Facebook converts the whole world into a metaverse. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, with NFTs as well, there are a lot of museums that are coming up in metaverses, virtual environments that are helping digital artists to showcase their images and video forms in a gallery space, even if it's virtual. Yeah. So coming to how uh, artists can find these opportunities and how they can, what all they can look forward to in to put themselves for their work forward and to collaborate with such museums or even other artists. So what would you think are some really great inspirations, really great organizations and communities where artists should put themselves forward, even institutions maybe where they could go and do their researches and get supported with the fund and something like that. So what would you what would your piece of advice, or what would you suggest artists to, interactive artists especially, to take this forward?
Well, I mean, generally, we would like to encourage interactive artists to keep doing what they're doing, because this is the start of what we believe is something big, and it's growing everywhere in the world. It will grow in India. We're convinced of this. And for young artists, this is the right time to get in. The beginning is tough. We know it, but this is the time. So go out there, learn, collaborate, learn from others. Don't be shy to ask for guidance, because this is how we grow, and make a name for yourself, because this is the time. So that way you're at the beginning, you're right there at the start of a new field emerging in India. And we believe this is a good advice for people who are thinking of starting in this field.
And to your other question, where to find different resources, it brings back to my time. I got interested in tech art, of course, because of our close friend who was involved in tech art since 2008, 10, I remember. But finding different artists and inspirations on Instagram primarily. And first thing I would advise, if anyone watching this podcast, that they should go and follow Sensistan and see what Sensistan follows. It has been a work for 3 years, following different artists, different museums, etc., where Sensistan follows. And once you find Sensistan and follow these organizations, you will see so many open calls from different museums for both online and physical from across the globe. So this is a very good resource to go over there and then start the research further. And there is a ton of material, ton of inspirations following it further.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Would you like to share any memorable moment from this extravagant journey that you have been through, and like what was the probably the happiest moment, or something that you're really that helps you satisfy with the thought of building something like this?
There's so many moments. Like every time there is a small, tiny success, it's a memory in itself. And I could personally just see back the whole few years from where we started from conceptualizing until the closure. There were so many different memories, special, so many.
Yeah, but I guess if we have to think of one and combining happy thoughts and nostalgic thoughts, I guess the day we had to close Sensistan phase 1 because of the COVID pandemic spreading very seriously in the second wave was so inspiring for us. We talked to artists and visitors and everyone and the community, and the feedback we got was just amazing, and we felt that our highest interpretation of what is success for us in terms of making Sensistan alive is that we inspire people. And then when we got all these feedbacks and comments and stories from people who have either visited once or become a very vivid part of the community over months and years, and we really had the feeling, yes, we've been successful and we did inspire people, and this was very, very heartwarming and memorable for us.
The whole idea of touching people without touching them, that's what Sensistan did, and it would have not been possible without the whole community. It was our brainchild, but it actually was formed because of such a huge community that was formed because of Sensistan. And that itself touched so many people, visitors coming, and everyone whom I speak to, they speak about their personal favorite moment in Sensistan. It's so amazing. It just feels so heartwarming.
Yeah.
And we can, well, I mean, that is why we did it, and
yeah, we did it well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So now we've had the time, right? After the closure, we had time to focus on the lab in the last month, and also to reconceptualize and see how we can integrate this, the COVID situation. And yes, so for phase 2, we are adjusting the concept, and yes, so stay tuned and be ready to see what's coming up.
Yes, we are all waiting. Even I am really curious on what you guys do next, and I'm sure it's going to be as brilliantly put up and extravagant as the Sensistan Museum in Goa. So I'm looking forward to that. So building communities, what advice would you give to someone who would probably like to build on a community for themselves and interact with the community to bring them together for a larger project? Or so what would your advice be?
So community, as I see it, is many different individual people, and the community is formed with one common objective or goal. So first is identifying such people who may not see it as their goal, but could be their goal. So that is the first part of it. And then, since there are so many people, there are so many different minds, and there are so many different dynamics that people bring it into a community. So one, as a leader or as a member of a community, it's important to balance all those things out and give people, different people of the community, something that they want to get out of the community. And then overall, as all these people, they work towards a common objective and have different goals, different steps of that objective, so that the community together can see those objectives, understand it, accept it, and build towards it. And the process is never ending. It constantly goes on, and you set your bar every time higher up and up, because eventually, as I've realized working with Sensistan, that this community, it grows, and then it breaks, and then a new community gets formed. And there are some few people from the past, they stay, and it constantly grows and grows in more people. That's the whole idea of communities, unless you want to have thousands and thousands of people as a part of the community. So people always do come in and go. So having this kind of modular goals and to go towards it and achieve it in the small pieces. And most important is to celebrate every small success with the community members that they are there, so that they feel part, they feel engaged, and give thanks to whatever they are doing it.
Do you think building a community was in a way easier or more difficult with the physical space, or is it better with the communities that are forming online internationally? Like, what are your opinions on that?
We had started a similar community in Cambodia, in an art space called Artshram, also another initiative that we had started. It did help definitely to have a physical space. But again, when I see there are a lot of online GitHub communities, there are also communities over there. So it's not one way or the other. If you want a physical presence to build something physical, yes, requires a physical presence. If it is an online, a software kind of a thing, does not require physical. So it's a different ball game altogether.
So something I would love to know more about your initiative in Cambodia itself. So how because that was the first, in a way, one of the first steps towards Sensistan as well. So what was that space, and how was that building a community?
Well, so Artshram in Cambodia wasn't planned. Sensistan was, as mentioned, carefully conceptualized and designed and then implemented step by step. Artshram wasn't like that.
It's a non-commercial business, non-commercial organization also.
And we didn't formalize it with the government in Cambodia either. So what was important was that we lived there and we had a space available. And the space happened to be bigger than what the two of us needed. And it happened to be amazing and at a great central spot of the city. And then it also happened to be the case that in Phnom Penh, there wasn't much of what the festivals, the music, the art, what we enjoy, right? Like more progressive, more contemporary, alternative vibes. It wasn't there because there was no space to actually have these things. So it kind of developed naturally that we had a space, we had an interest, and we more and more linked with people who had a similar interest. And we all met in our space. And then over the time, we started to form a community. First, it was very informal and it was through friends, and then friends of friends. And then we started to get more demand and more interest. And then we started organizing and professionalizing. And then out of smaller workshops and smaller gatherings, then we started organizing larger festivals and other events, bigger workshops. So it was very demand oriented, so to say. And herewith, I mean also our demand, right? So basically because if you, just like in India, right? If you don't have it, you create it. So it was like that. And because we saw this is possible, we were like, okay, if that worked in Cambodia, let's do it in India too. But bigger, more structured, with a bit of a different approach. But it gave us the motivation to see that if you want to do it, you can do it.
Yeah. So was this space also oriented towards tech art, or it was organically developed into more of an art space for anyone at all? Yeah.
So this is the time when we moved to Cambodia, and then I did not have a job at that time, and I was exploring technology and art. So this is so then slowly we started also inviting traveling artists to collaborate. So I would collaborate with the traveling artist who would come and stay with us for 10 days to 2 weeks, and we would create a project. And through this, we started working on different projects, and that's how the technology art started building and started taking a shape. But it was more like I would not call it was a technology art kind of a space. It's more community space, which had a different elements in it. And we did a lot of workshops and healing events and music and festivals eventually.
Yeah, in terms of music, it was oriented around electronic music, which was more away from the mainstream music one could find in Cambodia, to explore more all the genres within the electronic music that were not represented in Cambodia. So through that angle, a lot of people came drawn to our place as well, right? Because this was just not available anywhere else. And people who are into electronic music have a tendency to also be excited about other technology. Not necessarily, but a lot of them are. And so then they brought new aspects in, and this is how things very naturally developed. And then,
very organic, how it happened. The community was formed.
And as per your observations, how different was it culturally, Cambodia and Goa? How different were the cultural perceptions and how the reaction towards a space like this?
One thing straight off is like in Cambodia, the local people were not so engaging. So our community was built up mostly of expats, people who had been coming from different countries and making a life in Cambodia. Whereas in Goa, it was totally different. We had definitely a lot of international community, but a huge portion of it was Indian people also. So, which was very balanced in Goa, whereas in Cambodia, it was not. It was mostly catering to foreign. And there were a few Cambodians for sure who are a little curious and who would want to come and explore, but it was mostly for expats living in Cambodia.
Yeah, at the same time, right, where I do see similarities is like educated Cambodians and Indians are much more likely to come to a technology and art place or a community like the ones we started, rather than people from other social spheres, maybe with lower educational backgrounds. And so this is why we made such an effort learning from the Cambodia experience to really be open as much as we can and make our Sensistan in India so accessible. At the same time, it was clearly still it was a challenge, and it's something we would be looking to continuously work at. Because art shouldn't be just for the elite; it should be there for everyone, and we really strive towards doing that. But it is a challenge because it's not only that, it is coming with a different dynamic and different lifestyle, different expectations. And to bridge all that and bring people of so different mindsets together, that gives it a challenge, that as well as in Cambodia. Yeah. So we learned a lot in Cambodia.
Definitely. All our experiences from the past helps us shape what our future plans and how we are going to transform. But definitely all experience come very handy when we are thinking, putting our ideas into implementation.
And how did yourself coming into this space, not just as a curator and like providing this space, but also yourself coming as an artist, like getting into tech art, learning new things, collaborating with new artists. And also you've mentioned before that you have traveled a lot with your own art. So how did that add to uh, curating once again after Cambodia? Because that experience of having a space for artists, being an artist yourself, and then coming back to creating a community.
Yeah, wearing different hats of an artist, of a curator, and also a co-founder of a space. All this helps or helps each other, because I've learned by myself about the technology art. I've been experimenting quite a bit myself before I even thought about Sensistan long time ago. So sometimes seeing a concept and thinking through it, I could see where the pitfalls could be. So it helps me personally to say, okay, these are the steps you should not take, or these are the steps that you take, or these are the alternatives that are available. Because when you come with a concept, because there's technology and there is so many software languages and so many different components that could be used to achieve a similar goal. So this knowledge from previous helps for myself, and also when I'm collaborating with different artists or as a curator, when understanding what artist is trying to put and where it fits in the whole scheme of things, all this definitely help a lot, quite a bit. And yes, I'm still learning every time I'm collaborating with artists and sitting with artists who are doing their work. I learn more, and there is so much new development that is coming on a daily basis that is getting upgraded, and new things popping up. So it's sometimes difficult to keep tap on it, but yes, through involving with the different artists, it helps.
So I am sure even other artists who are coming into interactive art and exploring this space of generative art, code art, because there being a lot of development happening all together, and there being such a vast library of resources in different communities, those communities coming together, open source formats and all of that happening, how do you think an artist can not take all of this and get overwhelmed and still find a way to get through what their own style or what their own uh, art form is like? Yeah, they're experimenting with their own or developing their own art with all of these resources.
Yes, I mean, I can see what you mean by getting overwhelmed. Absolutely. There is so much of information out there and so much of inspiration out there. It is overwhelming, but I feel that it is a necessary step in development. People explore and see what is all there, and then see what inspires you and where you fit in. That is very important. So in each of different cases, it is important to go and explore and experiment with different things. And artist is not a job of a day, or you can get a license or degree from a university. You're an artist. Artist is being developed over time, and the form of art and the practice also changes over time.
Yeah.
So it's constantly exploring, constantly looking for what's new up there, and then slowly finding your own niche and then putting it together
Focusing on it.
for the audience players.
But I guess it's also important to be confident as an artist and to know you have your own things that excite you most, and that's good. One doesn't have to be a jack of all trades, but discover what one is most passionate about, and then
Absolutely.
dedicate to that, because it's impossible to do everything and to hop on every trend, and like that especially young artists will lose the footing. So understanding what's there is important. Also having the courage to make a decision, if it's only for that installation, but then dedicate and move ahead. I think that is also important. And that doesn't mean one cannot develop and change over time, but navigating the choice is important, especially nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's what happens with a lot of artists, that uh, there are some artists who focus on one thing from the start itself, but there are a lot of this happens a lot in the tech art scene, that the creative coders experiment with a lot of different uh, forms and different tools, and then come together and form the idea. So eventually the idea is more important, idea becomes more important than the tools itself.
Absolutely.
So this with this podcast, we are also trying to talk about lifestyles and how the lifestyle adds to your ourselves and our art or whatever we are doing. So I wanted to just know what your current day looks like, or where you are, what are you guys doing currently, what life it has brought to you guys after the first phase of Sensistan. And yeah.
Yes, it's a funny story. Right now, we are actually in our self-built camper van, living in a home of 7 square meters, a home on wheels. So where our camera is right now, right behind you is our kitchen. This used to be our dining table, which we just put it down. To our right is our bed, and to the left is the steering wheel. And to the bottom of this is 4 wheels, which takes us to different places. And day looks like
Yeah, today we had an active day and we climbed a waterfall and we crossed it on a one single rope with some climbing equipment. So that was exciting before we prepared for this call. At the same time, so we're taking this little break to get out of India. So we're currently in Europe, in Austria, and to reconceptualize Sensistan, to take a bit of a distance, so that we can also come refreshed. And yeah, so we are combining a good quality life with with work from anywhere, because we can.
it's a good time to be in Europe, enjoying the summers, doing a little bit of sports through climbing, forming a new passion, and it gives all the energy to come back full force.
Yeah, because clearly Sensistan took a lot of energy, and for starting up the next phase, we need to re-energize. At the same time, make sure our mind is fresh. So we're combining and developing a good work-life balance so that we're ready for phase 2. Yeah, and that is why we're currently here.
So where are you guys traveling to? Are you planning to also get into some art spaces around Europe? Or
Yeah, a combination of different things. Going to maybe a couple of music and art festival, some museum, some meeting friends, making more connections with different artists, and all of that together.
Yeah, and then combining it and linking it with time in the nature to re-energize and to have this balance. So this is what we're currently doing. Yeah.
how important do you think is to, at this moment, after all that experience and uh, having time to relax, how important do you think is to reconnect with nature as well, and do sports, like sports activities in nature? And so how do you think that is helping you uh,
Focus better. Yes,
yeah.
definitely, because we tend to forget living in cities that how important nature, green and sky, the clear sky and clear air, clear water for us. When we as the humans and animals is very important part of our formation. So reconnecting with nature helps us to bring that focus on. And just being in the nature also gets boring. So that's how we found this new passion of climbing rocks. So it's also connecting more closer to the nature, touching the rocks and putting that effort and muscles and just focus. It helps us to understand that, okay, this rock is very difficult. It's very difficult to climb when you're there.
Yeah, and all these things were things, and so right now, as with the COVID situation, this break has, well, it had to happen. We're making the best out of it, to utilize this time well, and yeah.
Nice. So, what would you like to put forward as the future plans of Sensistan? What should people be looking out for, or if they want to reach out to you in some ways, how can they do that? We'll obviously put all your handles and your contact information, but still, how do you like the community to probably connect with you, or yeah?
Yeah, thank you. We would love to hear from people. As we mentioned, this whole Sensistan is living on exchange and sharing. So please reach out. We don't mind which channel, Instagram, Facebook, email, that all works. Also, we have on our website, we have additional communication handles. So we're there, and we'd love to hear from people. Currently, we are, well, as we mentioned, planning for the next steps, and we will communicate what's happening and how Sensistan in its new remodeled version will be coming back.
Sensistan 2.0.
Exactly. So we're excited for that. And so everybody stay tuned, and yeah, you can expect something quite exciting.
Okay, that's been great. Thank you so much for being here in the podcast. I'm sure the listeners and even I have like taken a lot, not just from this podcast, of course. I've learned a lot from you guys, and the support has been really amazing. So thank you so much once again. And yeah,
Thank you so much for having us, for inviting us for this podcast, and very good luck with Tiny AF. Yes,
thank
I'm
you so
looking
much.
forward to hear more news and some time to visit you personally.
Yeah.
And see all the
Yeah, that
development.
would be amazing. Yes.